So Joe Manchin, I'm sure many are familiar with Joe Manchin by now, the West Virginian senator who's effectively crippled Biden's domestic agenda and alongside Arizona's Kyrsten Sinema is standing in the way of ending the filibuster as the Democrats are desperately trying to push through their bogus proposals of federalizing election protocol. The Democrats, in their current iteration, I view them like this group caricature in a giant yellow bus, and they're all the whinging children, and Manchin and Sinema are the two adults going, no, you can't have that. And Biden is somewhere in the back. He's the old incontinent grandpa in the wheelchair crying for ice cream. That is their party as it stands right now. And the Democrats, God bless their stubborn stupidity, because post-Manchin shooting down the domestic agenda, you had all of the swamp turning against him with the cliched cries of, oh, Manchin doesn't care about the American people, he's let down the people of West Virginia, etc., etc. Which, let's just be honest, shall we, this is the losing cry of a bunch of morons who, against their own party's best interests, are refusing to face the truth that their agenda, much like the entire occupancy of the White House at this point, is not popular with the American people. So watching the Democrats commit political suicide still has its gleeful moments after all, and yet for all of their blundering roars about saving democracy, their rhetoric proves they don't seem to quite understand what that word means. Coming from the mouth of the senile one himself, who asked in his recent Georgia speech, do you want to be on the side of Dr. King or on the side of George Wallace? George Wallace, the Democratic segregationist from Alabama. This is what happens when you have piss-poor speechwriters with very little historical knowledge, because it took the Republicans all of about 15 seconds to find a newspaper clip where Biden bragged about receiving praise from George Wallace. His speech now has been dubbed the worst political speech in American history, which goes really well with the worst president ever badge, coincidentally, besting even the infamous Carter Malay speech. Even the wettest noodles of Democratic partisanship has said maybe Biden went a bit too far. You think? This is from the guy who said in his inauguration that they should bring down the temperature a bit to heal the divide, but now everyone who disagrees with him and his desire to federalize the election procedure and not wanting to do away with over 2 centuries of history and ending the filibuster is now a racist. So much for that whole bringing the country together thing, eh? Well, he is at least uniting independents against him, so there is that at least. But getting back to Manchin and the idiots who accuse him of not liking the American people or even his constituents in West Virginia, it strikes me as odd that those who deem themselves the defenders of democracy, while also wanting to end election integrity measures that is overwhelmingly supported by the vast majority of American voters, don't quite grasp that Manchin was not elected by D.C. Manchin was democratically elected by the people of West Virginia, and not Washington. And as a representative of West Virginia, his duty, his obligation, morally speaking at least, is to look out for the interests of West Virginians. For all of the BS about him being bought off by special interest groups, coming from the Democrats, that's quite rich, as dirty as it may make me feel, it is possible to have a corporate lobbyist, a political representative, and the people, however unlikely as it may be, to be on the same side, like when there's a bigger target in the room, say, for example, the White House. And for all of the idiots outside of West Virginia who moan that Manchin doesn't care about his home state, how is he doing in his home state? Oh, would you look at that? His approval went up by 7 points. And if we look between 2 polls just conducted in the month of December, look at this. His strongly approved is 32%. It almost doubled in the space of under 3 weeks. Somewhat or strongly approve, 59%. He's probably got the strongest approval of any Democrat in the entire United States. Lord knows Biden's approval of 42% is complete bogus. But look at some further polling. 67% very worried about the rising costs of goods, and 69% are smart enough to know government spending will lead to higher costs of goods, which is not a surprise. West Virginia is very conservative after all. Does China use slave labor to undercut American workers? 80% said yes. And lastly, 51% of voters agree that clean energy policies would destroy the state of West Virginia's economy, which of course it would. West Virginia is coal country after all. So I think it's safe to say Manchin is in fact holding firm for the time being. He isn't budging. Not a surprise he wants to stay a senator. And bucking the Biden agenda seems to be very popular in his home state, and he has no reason to sign his soul over to Washington. And that's all for today. Until next time.